Welcome to this month's Party of Six. We have a fantastic panel joining us as always today, including a special guest. From our normal group, we have Meenakshi Singh of Sidecar, The Brook and the India Bar Show, Cliff Kreider of Chuck and Tap and Stinger Compliance, Dave Nitzel of Dave and Dave Consulting, Stinger Compliance, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And of course, me, Chris Schneider of the Bar Business Podcast and the Bar Business Coach. Joining us today as a special guest, we have someone who works with one of the coolest companies in the industry, which is Gin and Luck. And for those of you who don't know, Gin and Luck is the parent company of Death and Co. So Death and Co, we've talked about the Cocktail Codex before when we talked about our favorite books, but really well known, Alex Day, Dave Kaplan, they are the leaders there. And then right under them is this guy who's joining us, Willie Rosenthal. But to make sure we know a little bit about Death and Co, for those of you that aren't as familiar with it, they started as a flagship brand in 2006 in New York City. They have expanded to New York, Denver, Los Angeles, and Washington with that brand. They also have a new brand, Close Company or Close Company. I don't know. Willie will correct me and tell me which one it is. But it's more casual, high energy cocktail bar concept, Nashville, Las Vegas, Atlanta. They are working on a hotel brand. They are working on another membership driven digital venture. They have a whole bunch of stuff going on. So this is going to be a really interesting conversation to know not just how really nice bars work, but how they expand, how they grow, and all the different things that you can do in this industry to develop nowadays. But our special guest today is Willie Rosenthal. He is the Vice President of Operations of Gin and Luck. He is responsible for coaching things, leading things, doing all sorts of stuff. I don't even know. He's going to tell us. But he led the opening of Death & Co. in Denver. He is based out of Denver, and he has multi-unit operations experience. Just a really cool guy. So this is going to be a very fun conversation. Willie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So hopefully I did some justice to all of this, but like there is so much to talk about with Death & Co. and Gin and Luck and you and everything else. So fill us in a little bit on the background and what I screwed up, where I missed, and other things we need to know for both you and the company.
Yeah, you got it, Chris. It is close company, a little play on words, Death and Co, Death and Company, close company, and keeping your company close. But let's see about me. I've been in hospitality pretty much my whole career. I did a little bit of retail in high school. I was a board sports guy in California, skateboarding, surfing, snowboarding. And so I worked in a surf, skate, and snow shop because that's what you do when you're a teenager. But after that, yeah, I got my start in a mom and pop pizza shop in college, delivering pies and sort of keeping myself afloat. And the gentleman who owned that pizza spot, it was called Milo's, was actually named Milo. And Milo was a local guy, born and raised in that community. Hospitality and the act of hospitality was like at the heart of what Milo did at his tiny little pizza shop. And it really changed things for me. That was sort of it. I watched Milo take care of people and care for people and go out of his way for people in his community and kind of set me on my path. From there on out, I just wanted to do F&B and whatever this is, 20 plus years later, here we are. Let's see how I got to where I am now. I leveraged the hospitality industry, food and beverage for some travel. It's a really great way to see the world, right? It's easy to find work as you travel because it's sort of, whether the language is the same or not, the language of food and beverage remains the same. So I took advantage of that after college and I spent some time traveling Europe. I lived in London. After that, moved back to California where I got into some fine dining. Again, thought I'd do some travel, so I headed off to Argentina, where I had some friends and did some work there. It's also where I met my wife. Coincidentally, she's Guatemalan, not Argentine. And moved back to the U.S. with my wife, Mafi, and found our way to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Again, that sort of ski bum in me had the mountains calling. And it was in Jackson where things sort of changed and set me on my career path. So I worked for a group called Fine Dining Restaurant Group. Fine Dining Restaurant Group has well, now I don't know how many, but 6 restaurants, all different sort of styles and approaches to food, a brewery, catering company, a commissary, an ice cream shop, and all these things. And I really was lucky enough to be able to get exposed to all of them. At one point in time or another, I either worked in a location, I managed a location, and For a while, I did like float managing. So I got to a day here, 2 days there. Someone went on vacation, spend a week in that. And I got to see everything. So I got to see everything front, back. Catering is a whole nother world. And I spent a lot of time there. And that's where I was like, okay, there's so much to be offered to somebody when it comes to food and beverage. Like it's so different depending on the type of place and the type of people, the environment you're working in, the town you're working in, that I really decided, okay, this is the career path I want, but also that, multi-outlet or keeping it really multi-dimensional was important to me. And I just kind of put it out there. I wasn't trying necessarily to leave fine dining restaurant group, but I did, want to find a bigger environment, not necessarily a city. And got to talking to people and kept my resume updated. And along came Dave Kaplan. That's actually a cool story. Maybe we can come back to how we met and he invited me to interview. And yeah, eventually, after the interview process, Dave invited me to Denver. My brother was there. I had a new niece there. And it was just sort of perfect. Mafi was born in Guatemala, raised in New York City. So Jackson Hole was a little bit small for her.
Mhm.
And so a little bit more city life, but also still the mountain life is how we ended up in Denver, opening Death and Co Denver as the GM. And we just fell in love with being here and eventually bought a home. I'm actually in a little town called Evergreen, which is about 45 minutes west of Denver in the mountains. So we live in a really beautiful place here in the woods. And yeah, did I miss anything? That was probably more than you even bargained for.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Sounds like you're hitting on all cylinders. I like that. A beautiful place in the woods in Denver. Meanwhile, traveling the world and doing cool stuff sounds all right to me.
It's a cool industry that allows you to do that kind of stuff. Not every industry does.
100%. So, something I'm curious about, because it's one of the things that's really interesting to me about the kind of Death and Co story overall,
Hmm.
is you start with a cocktail bar, right? Now you have a giant operation that in really 20 years, it's one of the crazier growth stories in hospitality.
Well,
Um,
Chris,
Because
what's
it is just
crazy?
going from that cocktail bar, which a lot of people, well, they have a great cocktail bar. Maybe they have 2, maybe they have 3, but they don't end up in the hotel business, right? So as the VP of operations, that seems to me like there's a lot of not only change that has to happen along that process, but there's also a totally different culture between I run a cocktail bar and I manage a multi-location, multi-brand, multinational organization. So what did that kinda look like from your point in the organization as you went from running Denver to now overseeing something that is so much bigger?
Yeah, well, it's actually really only the last 8 years, right? It was just Death& and Co. East Village, the New York location, until, 2018. So, just the one bar up until 2018. So, in the last 8 years really is when everything has happened, and that's actually really at the heart of why, I joined the company. Dave Kaplan had this vision of not just a cocktail bar, and not just a cocktail brand, but growing it into essentially what it is today. I believed not only in his vision, but that's exactly what I was looking for. I wanted the opportunity to work, like you said, in something so multi-dimensional, multi-brand, hotels internationally. And yeah, that's what drew me to it. But it was also Dave himself and the way in which he wanted to approach it and how he approaches things in general. But so to get more to the point of your question, opening Denver Death& and Co. was a strategic move for the company. It wasn't just, "Hey, let's open our second cocktail bar," right? They, at the time, Dave, Alex, along with Devin Tarby and a few other players, had a pretty successful consulting company that had done work all over the world and in all elements of bar, whether that be dive bar or nightclub, cocktail bar, members clubs, distilleries. I mean, you name it. They've done a little bit of everything, including hotels and restaurants. So it was sort of an opportunity in Denver that came to them. Ryan Diggins, the owner of the Rambo Hotel, actually pursued Death& and Co. and said, "Hey, I want what y'all do in my hotel." And Dave saw the opportunity to say, "Okay, this hotel has a cafe, It has like a main lobby bar. It has a cute little mezzanine sort of intimate cocktail space. It has a rooftop garden. It's going to do large scale events, weddings, corporate stuff, meetings, parties, and in-room dining. So you kind of take all of that, and it was an opportunity for Death and Co to say, look, we have the ability to do all of these things, not just a small 50-seat high-end cocktail bar. We've got the experience to say, hey, we're a cocktail brand that does more than just this, sort of in that, second opportunity to open and be a bit more public. From there, we also got, sort of introduced to hotels. We were, while we lease the spaces, we are the F&B face in all of the outlets, except one actually. There is one independent outlet for the hotel. So we operate not necessarily independently. We are very much partners of the Ramble Hotel, and all of their guests interface with us the same way they interface with them. And so we got to learn all about hotels and how to operate F&B in hotels through Death and Co #2, if you will. And so that's when it was like, this is really cool, and there's a huge opportunity here, not just for the brand, but, for the business as well. Hotels are a big money game versus, your standalone bar or restaurant. And that's kind of what led us down that path. So, many years later, here we are, and the property in Savannah that we have now is actually in partnership with Ryan Diggins, the same gentleman who owns the Ramble. So, Midnight Artour, our hotel brand, is a conglomerate of both Gin and Luck and Ryan Diggins.
That's incredible. So, Willie, I met Dave and Alex, I think in 2014 or 15 or something like that, when it was just the New York City location, and I kind of got to see from afar the aspirational growth happen, which has been incredible. And we wrote about Dave in one of our books, and one of the things that he talked about was always being able to give somebody this holy shit experience, wowing somebody every time they come in. And I found that to be like immensely aspirational, but it wasn't just talk. Like, you guys really want to do that. So when we knew you were coming on, I thought, man, I want to talk about pressure. Like the idea of you've got one of the best, if not the best known brand in your space, and you have these huge aspirations. You're global, you're dynamic, which means you've driven a lot of complexity into your business model and still have the highest of standards. I don't know that I have a question other than what's that like to have to manage that across a global platform for you? What's the pressure or the stress, or how do you guys deal with that sort of expectation?
It's funny you asked. When we opened Denver, I was new to the company, Death and Co #2, and Death and Co already had such a huge following from the books, from Instagram, that's very well ran. And that pressure for me, I can't even tell you. It was immense.
Yeah.
And I don't have a cocktail background. So the pressure of, hey, running this large operation, my role there was that I had multi-unit experience.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was huge. And it was really crazy. You wouldn't believe it. We posted that we were hiring Death and Co Denver, and I got 650 applications in 2 weeks. And I got them from something like 30 or 40 countries and almost every state. And for somebody coming from the outside, that, talk about pressure. I was just blown away. What was cool about that, quick tangent, was it allowed us to actually make the decision, hey, we don't need to hire the best of the best from all over the world and the country. We've got enough people interested and more than enough talent in Denver to just hire from Denver. We didn't want to be a New York bar in Denver. We wanted to be a Denver bar in Denver. So it really set us on that path. Since then, we've only hired local all along, unless, of course, we have somebody who wants to transfer. But, I think how we handle that is, I don't know. I don't think any of us look at it the way you just said it. Like, it doesn't feel like pressure.
Okay.
And I don't think our staff feels that either. Maybe, getting hired for a new job that you're excited about, they feel some pressure, but it's less about the pressure of the guest or the outside looking in, because our approach to sort of fine dining, even though it's cocktails, is really casual, right? Like, we really want our people to be themselves. They get to dress the way they'd like to. We don't spiel or script anything. It's just like, hey, let's go out of our way to make sure that you're being you so that you can provide that incredible guest experience. If we're shaping people to be something, it's really hard
Mhm.
to adjust and to play it by ear with your guests, you know? So I don't know. I don't there's a lot of pressure from just the name of the brand. And I think the expectation of our guests is really high, but that's no different than any place that's doing really good stuff, right? Like if you're on a list or you've got a star or anything like that, like you make the slightest mistake and you're going to hear about it, or they might even post about it. And it's the same for us. So I don't know. I don't think about it that way, right? And I really don't think our team does either. I'm sorry, I don't totally
No,
answer your
look,
question.
I love the answer. It was really top of mind for me. It's what I wanted to ask you about because I have a lot of respect for the brand. You know what? I mean, I forgot about the coaching credentials too. Like you guys have set up shop again all over the world. So it feels, and I know how Dave a little bit thinks about some of this stuff. And I'm like, man, how does that translate? But what I also know is you guys have an amazing culture in the business and you do so many really cool things right. And I'm not going to ask about that because this is my turn. I already asked my question if it comes back to me, but I know you do great cultural work to help drive a certain amount of performance, but in that authentic, comfortable way, and I just think I think it's a great answer, I think it's awesome, and, I'll throw it to Cliff or Min for the next question.
Well, Dave, before we go to Cliff, like you're right. We want to be the best place to work first, right? It's not about the guest experience first. No offense to any of our guests. It's about being the best place we can work first. And that takes a lot of that pressure away.
Mm, mhm.
That's amazing. Really, oh, I must tell you that in 2014, when I read the book, Your Death and Co., the book that came out, the first, I think, was called The Modern, if I'm not wrong.
Modern classics. Yeah.
Yeah, and I still have it behind the bar. I'm right now not in the bar, so I can't show you the book. But that became one of the key things. I run three bars in Delhi NCR, and and a lot of it is based on making people comfortable around you. And it's a lot about how you guys have described the experience itself of delivering the cocktail experience beyond the cocktail itself. And I feel like that was one of my literally, I mean, I would say that was one of like, I had just started off as an entrepreneur at that time, my first bar. And yes, some of those books have stayed with us forever. And I must say that's such a key thing that I feel like when we're talking about today in 2026, it's always relevant and it'll always be relevant as it would be, as many techniques come out, as many trends catch up, and as many awards come your way. I feel at the end of the core experience is always going to be the same. And I feel you guys delivered that and talked about it in a very guest forward way, I would say. Like, I think that's the mindset that changed the way I also looked at hospitality in a much more, I would say, macro way. And rather than micro way, we always look at, oh, this drink has this and this, and hence I'll become the best, or this menu needs to do this. When do you say what is beyond that? And I feel like when you start looking beyond these mini things and looking in the macro things, right, is when I feel like you take the leap, and you guys have taken a massive leap. I mean, my question was about diversification. I feel a little bit of that Chris covered in the beginning as well. I'm a bar owner, and we do some consulting on the side as well. We work with a few brands, and we always talk about the same thing. The biggest challenge is that here I am, talking about my expertise, which is my drinks expertise, my cocktail bar expertise. I'm all about the drinks, I'm all about the cocktails experience, all of that. And then, okay, how do I jump to now I need to do consulting, which suddenly you have to change your point of view and start looking at the other business. You might not necessarily agree with the people you're sitting on the table with all the time. That's always a key challenge. How do you define that? How do you define those boundaries, right? And you must have those skill sets in your team. I'm sure that you have that diverse team as well, right? From a hotel experience to a experienced people who bring that bouquet of experiences into your corporate structuring when you do that, right? So I would like to learn a little more about that if possible, from you.
Yeah. Yeah. The books were really important in describing that guest experience, of course, right? But also it's the product that allows us to do that, right? The product is very good. We spend a lot of time and effort in that. We have people who are experts in cocktail making, and that's the backbone still. But if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have the space to sort of take it casually, right? So but I want to make sure I understand your question clearly. You're curious how we are you specifically asking about, when it comes to a new brand or
Yeah,
consulting
new
project?
brand, diversification, growth. The growth mindset when you said 2008 with one bar to the next, which you joined, and then after that, moving on. Is that growth mindset about bringing in the specific set of skills and bringing that sort of an infrastructure together? Where does that leap, and how does a normal business person who's running a few bars, one bar, going to go to that next level? How do I become you?
I think first and most importantly, it's, staying true to ourselves. Each of the bars is different, right? They're different in the way they look and feel, in the way they were designed. But of course, they're different in that the people we hired, like mentioned earlier, are local, and each of these communities are very different. And the people within them are different. And what they're looking for from our bars is very different. And we allow that to happen intentionally. Sometimes it's hard, but the goal is to open in Seattle, which we're doing in a couple of months, hire from Seattle, learn from the local team there on what people are looking for in that market and cater to that too, right? Like not just say, oh, this is the box we live in and this is how we do cocktails and this is our service. And, a really good example and where we learned this lesson on how to just be ourselves within that individual community was in Denver. We had all this incredible talent and everyone knew the New York bar and wanted to be the New York bar. And I mean, from ownership to management to the staff, it was almost like we were trying to recreate New York. What that meant was they were dressed like cocktail bartenders in New York, which even in 2008 and 8 might have been, you know, bow ties or suspenders, bolos, like all the things. And in Denver, people are very casual, right? Like it's flannels and jeans and hoodies and athletic wear. So the staff didn't feel themselves. In fact, they didn't look themselves. And we quickly realized it's because we put them in that box. And once we said, okay, well, let's let you wear whatever you sort of want to wear as long as it's professional and fits the mold, it started to look and feel very much like Denver. But what was still true was the cocktails and the guest experience. The space was beautiful, but it became very much Denver. So, I think, coming back to the answer, I think staying really true to yourself within the brand,
Yeah.
but allowing flexibility, right? You can't say it's always going to be the same and provide what that consumer in that market is necessarily looking for. And a lot of brands as they expand, especially into like big chains, they've got all their systems and processes dialed in so much that it's just copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. And as we're growing, there's some DNA there, right? Process wise, that is allowing us to do these things faster. But we're not, what's most important is we're not trying to copy paste. And if you've been to any of them, you'll see that and feel that. And we hear from our guests a lot, wow, it was so different here or there. And every guest who's been to all of them has a different favorite and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it's really important that you stay true to yourself, build your systems and processes to make it easier. Other than that, allow the flexibility that each store is going to need. When it comes to a separate brand, which I'm sure we'll get to, a whole nother ballgame. It's been a big learning
Right.
experience.
Right. And when you decided to grow with Death and Co as the brand name and not change the brand, so you would have, if you when you traveled from New York to Denver, Denver to, so every time when you moved to a new city, you didn't think of a new identity, new creation, or was it obviously that was thought of for the brand, assuming the brand name, give you the mileage as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the plan was always to have some more Death and Co's, but not to only and solely focus on Death and Co, not to saturate the market, not to overdo it where it potentially becomes less interesting. So Denver opened, LA shortly behind that. And during that time, and actually after, there were some other brands that popped up. There were some other projects we worked on throughout the country under different names. Lost Hours, there was a project called Sparrow in Fort Lauderdale. We did the Danforth in Portland, Maine, which was very much a restaurant. And boy, was that challenging to say, okay, we know Death and Co so well. It's
Yeah.
got an incredible following. It's known so well. To then create a new brand out of thin air and a new vision and a new, fan base or attempt to was incredibly challenging. It takes a lot more time and energy. I mean, even coming up with a name and a logo, right? Like the time and energy you put into that just to say, hopefully it works is pretty big risk.
Yeah.
We're no longer involved in any of those properties, right? Now that was an intentional decision slash COVID decision, but you know, that sort of post COVID as we opened and closed or opened and moved on from projects, we really learned, that it's incredibly hard and we have something really good. So how can we make the most of that without overdoing it? Which is actually sort of the birthplace of close company. You asked when you're moving to different cities,
Yeah.
what we are fortunate enough to have a lot of folks coming to us from different cities and saying, we want a Death and Co, say in Atlanta, right? And maybe it's a developer or it's a fan or it's a cocktail bar that's on its way out and is looking for somebody to move in. We were getting all this, hey, come to our city, which is great, but not every city is necessarily built for a Death and Co. That could be population based, it could be the location that was being offered may or may not be the best fit for a Death and Go. And that's really where we were like, well, instead of recreating something every time, what if we did create something that's Death and Co esque, has through lines to Death and Co. And in this case, it's really the product. It's what's in the glass, right? That still speaks to Death and Co. But can happen in other places. To be perfectly honest, post COVID, we were aiming for higher margins, higher volume. Cocktail bars, you don't get a ton of people through the door. You don't have huge check averages. But as Chris and Cliff can probably attest to, you get a lot of people through on a Friday night and have a higher margin in that glass. It can go a long way. So yeah, that's where close company was sort of birthed from, right? It was the goal of we do want to have something else, but not a whole bunch of something else's.
Right.
And so now we can focus just on the two brands. They're different in identity, they're different in style, and they're different in the type of employee we hire, but they're still of place. At the end of the day, they still have that trueness to the guest experience, to the product, and allowing them to become what they are within that city. So it's interesting, they're very, very different. But from our perspective and the way we manage them, they don't feel that different.
Yeah. No, I mean, I fully agree. I run 3 bars, 3 brand names. It's tiring. It's like, and you're constantly trying to work on the imagery, the plan, the brand plans, everything, communication, and also constantly your DNA is the same. Like you said, your service orientation might be the same, but it's a lot sometimes about the timelines at which you've operated and how do you consolidate something like this at a later stage, right? So I think you guys got the opportunity during COVID to do that,
Yeah,
which
we
kind
did.
of worked in your favor. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's not impossible, run the multi brands, but those systems and processes become even that much more important, right?
Yeah. So like it's like you work on a corporate structure. So with the central marketing team, central finance team, central HR team is how you're able to communicate in the same way through
Yeah.
brands. And
Yeah.
hopefully you're achieving that because India is also has its own, geographically we are very, very varied. So now north to south to east to west, I'm also constantly under pressure to deliver um, understandable concepts, where we are and what we're doing. I mean, the timelines might be different in terms of the cocktail experience itself, as you say. So that those are different challenges from a country to country point of view, probably.
Yeah, something else within that corporate environment we have now is we've got a couple of people that are specifically focused on each brand, right? Both for their expertise and, to keep it sort of small and focused on and keeping it differentiated. We sometimes have a hard time differentiating. Let's say we write out a process of, even if it's writing out payroll, but it's different from state to state, or this brand handles cash and nothing goes and close companies do not. And so, there's these other pieces of the puzzle where accounting might treat them both the same, But we have a couple of people, and Matt Bellinger oversees Death and Co's, and Lauren Corvu, who oversees the Close Companies, that help us sort of, keep those brands on brand and ensure that each one's getting what they need individually, even though they're a part of the bigger ecosystem.
Cliff?
Yeah, I'm just listening here. I mean, Willie's right. I mean, you've got to be hyper local. You can't, obviously, they figured it out. You just can't take Death and Co. and stick it in Denver. You got to have your DNA, and then you've got to be hyper local in that environment. And even in our little world here in Atlanta, we could say, oh, we're in Atlanta, but we're really not. We're in 5 different little communities outside of Atlanta, which all have a different demographic. And when I say demographic, it's different. And we have different managers. The clientele expects something a little different than in Woodstock versus Lawrenceville versus Alpharetta versus the Battery. So, I mean, Willie's right. If anybody's listening, flexibility has to be key in any expansion, unless you're Chick-fil-A or Burger King or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, I'm understanding a lot of what he's talking about and the challenges. And Meenakshi is asking is correct. It's hard as hell to expand inside a metropolitan area. I can't imagine what it's like to expand outside the state. We tried, we looked at different locations, but my gosh, you just get overwhelmed a little bit. So it's easier to stay home. So big challenge. What do you, Willie, what have you found to be easier, or what have you found to be harder with expanding out of the local market of New York?
Yeah, I think, Cliff, before I jump into that, you mentioned it's hard to expand within the metropolitan area. I think that's why you see so many people who do expand within a metropolitan area with so many different brands.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
And like, take Union Square Hospitality Group, not only all those brands, but originally they were like all within walking distance, right? Keeping it close together allows, a much smaller corporate team who can kind of bop in and out.
Right.
Keep it within the family, right?
You got synergy. Yeah.
In my opinion, that's sort of the two models. It's like you go big and broad and sort of do your best to keep it the same-ish, or you keep it close and you can get a lot more variability based on your demographic and geography, right? Oh man, the challenge is state to state. And now, I don't know if we mentioned, we're in Australia now as well, in both Melbourne and Brisbane, as of about a year ago, a little less than a year ago. And I already mentioned a little bit, but state to state, the laws are so different. Whether it be your liquor laws vary terribly, where, as you know, Cliff, we're in Atlanta and we're not open on Sundays. That's just the rule.
Try living through COVID in Atlanta.
Yeah, sure. Well, and I spent time in Utah, and Utah's got all of these crazy liquor laws that just make it different, not worse or better, just different. But labor laws, incredibly different from state to state. Doing openings, and I mostly now sort of oversee the opening process, applying for your different permits and licenses and how you do that. It's different everywhere. The biggest challenge is, learning the way things are done in this state or in this county or in this country, because it is different from place to place. And, you get good people behind you. You find, lawyers or local administrative people who do this, and you take good care of them and get close to them and get a lot of help is really a big part of our focus in expansion is that laying the groundwork before we get there, before we're open there, is really important to understanding it, to opening on time. It gives us the opportunity to get to know people who are there. We spend a lot of time in market as much as possible. And that's everybody from Dave and Alex, down through the entire ops team. We will get there and not just spend time there, but explore bars, restaurants, neighborhoods. What are the tourists doing? What are the tourist activities? We're going to go and do all of that. Sure, it's really fun. It's a huge perk, but it's because we're trying to understand the place the best we can. And often what we find in those expansions in those visits is what's missing, right? We might say, oh man, nobody is open till 3 a.m. here. So in this place, we're going to be open till 3 a.m. Where in Denver, it's 12:30. But nobody's open till 2 unless it's a dive bar in Denver, right? So I think a big part of it is exploration. If you ask Dave and Alex, they're going to tell you, we're not going to open anywhere unless it's a place they love to go, right? It's somewhere they love to visit. They've been there before. Then maybe they know people there, friends, family, and it's somewhere that they enjoy visiting, and so would the rest of us. Why open somewhere you don't want to be, essentially, right? If you're going to spend a lot of time there, especially out of a hotel, and you got to go back year after year, why open somewhere, even if it's a great opportunity where you don't enjoy going and you don't enjoy the people, right? So that's the first step. Do we enjoy it there? The next step is, okay, let's get to know it as much as possible. Figure out the nuances of the specifics of the city, state, or country. And then the hiring process is key too, right? Making sure we hire local, and more often than not in our visits, we get to know some bartenders, bar managers, owners, and we really try to leverage that as much as possible for our hiring process as well.
Well, I'm going to submit my resume for any recon that you want to hire me for.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
definitely a big perk of the job. I wouldn't say, we like spend fortunes on it. But we do make sure it's an important part of the vetting process.
No, it's the most fun I have is because I'm kind of an analyst by trade, and so I think a lot of restaurateurs, food and beverage guys are too. I don't know how many times my kids would duck under the table to tell me the brand of a table or a brand of a chair.
And over the plate,
I probably have 1,000 pictures of bathrooms in my phone. It's probably kind of creepy, but
you and me both. Light fixtures.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Cool signage.
yeah,
My wife won't let me face the restaurant, right? Like if we go out to dinner and we go sit at a table, it depends. If it's somewhere that I'm like really excited, it's sort of our fee, she'll say, you want to sit facing in? You like to see it all? Absolutely.
Right.
But if we're it's just her and I, you're facing the wall.
Well, it's like a show. I mean, I'm watching the show. Yeah, I forgot who's in front of me, right?
Totally.
Yeah,
I'll walk out of a restaurant and I can tell you if they were overstaffed or understaffed, how big their sections were, who was new, and that's not what I was there for.
No, you're right. You're counting the people going in, counting them going out, how many tables turned. I know it's just so much fun. And then in the cocktail side, I'm asking the bartender, was that 1.5 ounces or was that 2? I'm trying to figure out the cogs.
Yeah. Actually, that's a really interesting point too, because you asked about the challenges of these different markets. We had talked about maybe talking about that. So I made a list of how challenging it was to be in Australia. That's like a mile long. But one of the most important things or biggest surprises for us, Cliff, was we have all of our specs, right? We've got 3,000 drinks, say, in our compendium. It is all filed away. It's very well organized. You go to Australia, we're going to use some of those to introduce them to what we do. And then, they'll also write their own. And so we start building out the drinks and we're pricing them out with their beverage team. And somebody says, hang on, there's 2 or 2.5 ounces of booze in this.
Yep.
And we're like, yeah. And they said, well, nobody here drinks anything with any more than 1 or 1.5 ounce of booze in it. Like this will ruin people because they'll be so surprised. They're used to drinking 4 or 5 drinks, not 2.
Yeah.
And we had to then rewrite specs of drinks that we have had in our lexicon for years and years and years that are very well-known drinks. Say, well, how can old-fashioned? Somebody's going to order it. We've actually had to adjust that down.
Right.
The glass size is different even. So like you don't serve a martini in a big old V martini. You serve it in a nice small martini. It's the same drink. You just got to proportion it all down, right? So
Yep.
that was really fascinating and took a ton of work to make that change.
Right. And that's a surprise that you didn't know was going to be hitting your fence, I guess.
Yeah. Also in Australia, the labor is unbelievable. They take such good care of their people, whether it's time off, right? Like, holiday in most of the world is very different than we see it in US or we get in the US. It can be very long and very, very expensive, but that's just the norm. Also in the different states in Australia, there'll be, anywhere from normal time to time and a half to double time and a half.
Wow.
And that goes for how late you work. As you pass, I think it's 10 p.m. and then again, midnight, your hourly rate goes up. If you work on Saturday, your hourly rate goes up. If you work on Sunday, the same. If you work on Sunday past midnight, you get the idea, right?
Yeah.
you work on a holiday. If I might mess this up, it's either double or triple to start and autograts. And the autograts go on and they're huge. And a portion of that goes back to the business for being open up.
I
Yeah.
find that so
Pretty,
fascinating.
it's fascinating, but it's also the type of thing that you can ask every question you can think of to, like, we've got a business partner there, AVC, Australia Venue Co. They're incredible partners. Yes, every question you think you can. And then you don't realize you should have asked that one question about what is the expected size of a drink,
Right. Yeah.
right? Or how do you pay after midnight? Never asked that before because I've never heard of it before.
We were in Nepal, in Kathmandu, and we were looking at the bar operations. Out of all the things that we thought we've covered, we had no idea that they follow lunar calendar instead of solar calendar. So they are in 1982 or something, and they're here. So, you're talking to your finance guy and getting this. So can we get the monthly closing? And they're like, oh, month is still 15 days away closing. So I'm like, no, but we start closing, and then, first week we start assessing, and they're like, no, 15th is our closing. So you have to rejig your entire system, and their months are also named in the lunar calendar wise. So it's not January, February they are following, right? So this is something, it's actually named differently. So you constantly are struggling with what's the calendar in which we are operating. It's insane. I had no idea what is coming at us. I mean, this was, this took us like, my CA was like really worried about how will they manage here in India. What they're used to, the systems and procedures usually, right? So it's a whole set of challenges that can come into you.
Speaking of something you'd never think to
Nuts.
ask.
Just absolutely nuts.
Are you on the lunar calendar? I think we should all go to
Yeah.
Kathmandu and see Min's new place too. Doesn't that sound like fun?
Yeah,
Willie,
they're
like
on
you, a
lunar
traveling
calendar.
type, let's go to Kathmandu.
Yeah, I'd love that.
I mean, that's the best excuse to go to Kathmandu I've ever heard of.
Cliff, that's a
Mhm.
song, right?
Seeger.
Nice. Nice. Hey, Willie, I have a
Good plug.
question. I know a little bit about your organization and I understand that we've talked about how things can be so unique by location. But usually in terms of a business culture, a lot of people say, if you look at a LinkedIn, everyone's talking about how important business culture is, yet no one really takes the time to define it. So everyone has a culture. Sometimes it's understood and sometimes it's the Wild West. But you guys have taken the time to be very definitive about your corporate, or not your company culture. Your core beliefs don't change regardless of where you are. The core fundamentals don't change. And you've taken the time as an organization to define what those are and then be able to coach that out. I assume to everyone on the team, regardless of what country or state that they're in. Could you take them? Because I like this. This was my second best question because I think other people could really learn from it because people talk about culture all the time. And I work with lots of bar and restaurant groups, and almost none of them actually have it defined. And you guys have done that. Do you have 5 minutes on that for the world?
Especially in the bar world, right? A lot of employees are looking for that family feel, that mom and pop sort of bar environment. And as we've grown and become more corporatized, and that's through our organization, literally the way we're organized, there's the good and the bad there, right? There's some things about that are really beneficial and some that make it more challenging. One of those things that can be that actually on both sides of the equation is our structure, right? So we are very structured in a corporate way, if you will, but we managed to maintain a little bit of that family and mom and pop vibe door to door because everybody's local and because we're a little bit removed from being within the door. And like you said, core values, right? That sounds like something you hear at a Marriott or Chick-fil-A, like you mentioned, Cliff, is really living core values. We wrote core values, when was that? 2018 or 2019. Gin and Luck was created to sort of become the umbrella company for our different brands. And originally we had, I don't remember how many. Let's say it was 8. Might have even been more than that. And they're individual words, and it was just a list of words. it didn't really mean what it was intended to mean,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And if you had asked an employee what the core values were, they could list half of them, maybe. But we realized, and this was learned from bigger organizations who have great culture, that creating these core values that we truly believe in, that we can define, and that more importantly, we can live by and impart on our employees and use it for praise, but also use it to explain why they did something wrong
Mhm.
or not the way we would have liked them to, was huge. So we've narrowed it down to 5, and they're well defined, and we refer to them constantly. Everybody can name them. We truly use them for accountability, both good and bad, and that sets the tone. It really helps. Okay, this is who we are, who we want to be, how we believe we should act as human beings, and that's the first step to really creating some culture, right? There's no muddiness on what is Death and Co. and close company. What is the employee who work here expected um, to be, believe, behave, but also what can they expect from us, right? So I believe that's the first step in our strong culture. On top of that, we're an open book, right? So Dave and Alex on a regular basis share all of our financials, whether we're doing well or doing poorly. And there's some doors that have done poorly and eventually closed, and they knew that all along. We don't hide anything and allow them to understand where we're at, because it also helps them understand the pressures we might be applying or why we can and can't do something, right? If they totally understand the business and why we're making the decisions we're making, that really helps build a lot of culture. It also motivates folks to be a part of something they're learning more about or how they can contribute better rather than just sort of being a cog in the wheel. A couple other pieces that I think are really important. Again, is probably more common in a corporate environment than most bars, is we give our employees reviews. And they're sort of twice a year. So annually they get a real review, a pretty in-depth review their supervisor spends time on, where they're reviewing the employee's performance, mostly against core values, and the employee reviews it themselves. I'm reflecting on how am I performing, and then they sit down and compare and contrast. And it's not disciplinary. It's just like, where do you think you are? Where do we think you are? Great. We're perfectly aligned. Stay on that path. We're not. Wow. Okay. So here's where we don't see eye to eye. Let's talk about why and let's get you there. Then 6 months later, we do a check-in. It's not a formal review. We don't put as much time and effort into it, but we sit back down and go back and look at what we did in the review, which is all documented, and say, where are we now? It's been 6 months. Are we improving? Do you feel like you're getting the help from us you need based on the review to get you to where you want to be or where we need you to be? So we have those opportunities to have open and honest dialogue with every employee from top to bottom. Dave and Alex review each other. I mean, you go all the way down to our newest employees. They get an opportunity for feedback on a very regular basis. That doesn't exclude, the on-the-fly coaching, right? That
Mhm.
happens on a daily basis, but it is something structured that people can look forward to and that they can look back on and remind themselves of where they were. And I think oftentimes that's really impactful too. This is where I was and this is where I am now. I was a bar back. I wanted to be a bartender. I'm the head bartender. Part of that is we got them there by working with them to get there. And then the last is like a state of the company type stuff. We've been a little bit inconsistent to what we'd like to do here in format. We've tried to do like a big town hall, virtual, get everybody on. We've tried to just record them and send them. We've done newsletters, but similarly to the open book approach, it's just what's going on? What markets are we looking at? Where are we expanding? What are we doing differently? Our benefits are changing in June, right? Everybody found that out when we did our last state of the company meeting. I think it was in February or March, just keeping everybody in the know. So it's not like, the corporate entity up here is doing what they do and we're doing what we do in these doors. Everybody's a part of everything, really to the extent they want to. Some people don't engage with that at all. That's fine. A lot of them do. And I think, all of those pieces really bring the shared culture together from door to door. And then I know I keep saying it, but the specifics in each door brings their own culture to it. And we allow, our management to speak to that too, right? Hey, at this door, we don't want to do that because this staff feels differently.
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Then you guys don't have to. but everybody else. Hope that
So,
answers.
Willie, I want to ask a bit of a follow up here because I'm a finance guy largely. A lot of what I do is finance work. And I tell people all the time, hey, you should share your financials. And every single person tell that to almost inevitably is scared to do it. Right. And my argument has always been, well, if your team sees the numbers, they know what's going on, they will help you. Right. You're giving them information to help you. Don't be embarrassed that you're not making money. Share it with them, and maybe you will make money. It's so refreshing for me to hear that from a big corporate standpoint, you guys are kind of, well, not big corporate, but growing corporation standpoint, you guys are doing the same thing. So, what would you say as somebody who does this at scale to that independent bar or restaurant owner that's saying, I'm afraid to share where I am?
Start small. I think that independent restaurant owner might be a little less comfortable telling all of their employees, particularly because they're usually in that door a lot. And it can be unsettling or embarrassing even to see a negative number at the bottom line. But if you share that information with the key players, right, whether it be a manager or your head bartender, the people that impact change on a day-to-day basis and drive culture back to culture. And, culture has a big impact on your overall financial performance. And if they can understand and they can speak for you on behalf of you to the other members of the team, I think that can be a step in the right direction and maybe allow somebody to feel a little bit more comfortable because they have this small group. Maybe it's 2 people, maybe it's 4 who they really trust, and allow them to sort of trickle that information down organically versus maybe necessarily looking at it on paper. That'd be my thought. I've never really thought.
Awesome. And one other quick question I wanted to ask, because I think you had mentioned when you brought up Close and Company that you guys don't take cash there.
Yeah.
So because a lot of the folks I work with are Midwest, South, like they're still 30, 40% cash. But I know particularly, you get into some of these larger cities, even the folks that are taking cash are, 2, 3% cash and that's it anymore. What made you guys decide to go just no cash at all?
Truth is, in Atlanta, when we opened, the team there wasn't comfortable carrying cash. That was it. They came to us and said, hey, I think it was one of the managers was like, look, in my last couple of jobs, we didn't carry cash because there were some incidents back whenever. I'm not super comfortable. We said, okay, let's ask the team. Hey, y'all, how do we feel about carrying cash? And the majority said we'd rather not. And we said, okay, right? That's back to saying, what is the culture? What is that local team need and want? We found it to be really beneficial really quickly. Cash handling at opening takes time. Cash handling at closing takes time. Cash disappears. Tips cause arguments, fights, accusations. Cash tips in particular, because who knows where it went. And yeah, it just made things easier. Bank runs don't have to happen. I mean, you name it. For a brand that Close Company, we keep saying it's tended to be a high volume brand. It also doesn't have a very big team. You might walk into a Close Company one night where there's 2 people in the building, right? Like we don't have the same sort of infrastructure or large management teams. A Death & Co could have anywhere from 2 to 4 salaried managers or even 7 in a hotel property. Whereas, Close Company might have 1, right? Who's really overseeing everything. It just makes their lives a lot easier. And we saw that firsthand. And so we actually switched POSs recently from Lightspeed to Toast. And when we made the switch in Nashville in the POS, we were like, well, let's just switch the cash as well. We are planning to do that everywhere. And I do mean major metropolitan cities as well. Like you said, 2 or 3%. We're seeing 1 to 4% between Denver, New York, LA, and DC. And the assumption is that person, sure, they have cash and wanted to pay with cash. They also have a credit card. They also have a cell phone that pays. So even though they might say, here's the cash, and we say, I'm sorry, we don't take cash. Maybe 5 years ago, that could have been really, really unsettling. And now they're just like, oh, okay, I have another.
I have a follow-up culture question, Willie, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Look, I'm a culture nerd, as you might know, and I do some coaching on it, and I'm super interested in. There's levels of sort of culture failure, and what breaks my heart is the people who actually try to define it and they just pick the words, like it becomes an HR project. And what are the 5 words that are current or popular right now? That what's the right thing to say versus who are we? And so I'm curious about your transition in what you guys saw I'd love the thought process of, hey, we had these 8 words that we pulled out of the dictionary that I don't know that this is how I'm imagining this, that these are the 8 words that we thought sounded like the right 8 words. And that didn't, I'm making this up, that didn't work for us. Tell me a little about the path from the 8 words to the 5 things that actually define you guys. Is there anything insightful that people can learn from? Because I don't think I think you're in 1% or less territory in terms of your understanding of what culture really is and how to really define it and then implement it throughout the organization for our industry. It's a unicorn. I'd just love to hear a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? We created Gin and Luck to sort of bridge the gap. Essentially, at the time, it was to bridge the gap between the Death & Co. brand and business and our consulting arm. Instead of them being 2 separate entities, we wanted to bring them together, okay? So bringing Proprietors LLC, consulting, and Death & Co. together, we put those 2 teams around a table. This was actually my introduction to sort of the next level of the organization. I got to sit at that table. It was a really fun thing for me at that time, but also in my career. And we did exactly what you said. Here's a dry erase marker, Dave Kaplan on the wall. Throw some words at me that you believe we should embody. And, 40 words on the board. Okay, now let's go through and one by one, keep it or kill it. Narrowed it down to 15. Okay, let's talk about why these 15 and keep them or kill them. Narrowed it down to 8. We battled for 2 hours on the last, I think it was 2 words.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I wish I could remember what they were. One was empathy.
Empathy's always on the list, by the way, and I hate it, for the record. I won't go into why, but I hate empathy as a cultural touch point.
Defined somewhere. Anyway, I'll have to look when we take a break at some point. There it is. It was empathy or intuition. Which one? And we drew a blue line between the 2. And we still to this day refer to it as the thin blue line, which is the line between empathy and intuition. But anyway, so we ended with 8. We didn't define them in our own words. We defined them like a Google search, right? What is connection? The internet says this. We just wrote them all down.
Mm-hmm.
We may have made some slight adjustments in those and we don't like that word or how that, right? And then that was it. Here's our core values, everyone. Embody these. And that was the extent of it, right? We did speak to them on a regular basis, but we didn't use them as a tool. And this is, Dave, what you're talking about. This is where we learned we were doing ourselves and our team a disservice. These core values were that thing on the wall, painted in the hallway you enter in that everybody just walks right by.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we don't actually do that, but, some big organizations do. And, we quickly learned, and it wasn't too long after, a year or 2, they weren't effective. It wasn't helping them. So then we went back to the drawing board. How do we take these 8 words and make them a tool, make them into something that I mentioned earlier we can use both to set the tone and to hold people accountable and to reward and recognize. And so we essentially narrowed down from those 8 to our 5, changed one of those 5 into something new, and gave it a try. And every year we revisit them and say, is this still the right 5 words? Do we still believe these are our core? Because as we grow, we also changed as an organization, and we have changed these core values slightly, not every year, but pretty much, even if it's in definition. One of our core values was pursuit of excellence. Okay. I'll read it to you. It says, we will forever be chasing excellence, even when we sometimes fail. It is a pursuit without end. It used to say, we will forever be chasing excellence. It is a pursuit without end. We missed even when we sometimes fail. So a couple of years ago, we added that in. And we actually learned that lesson by opening and closing a door. And it was devastating to some folks.
Mm-hmm.
Or folks in other organizations were like, are we okay? Is the company okay? And we're like, we're totally fine. It's not something that's scary. It's a part of our our growth, our lifespan. So we decided to add even when we sometimes fail. We know we will. It's okay. Perfection is not the goal, and we will fail. So things like that, ensuring that we are, again, a living, breathing organization, and we're making these changes and adjustments for ourselves, but also for our culture, right? Maintaining our culture. That our culture has changed significantly since 2018 till now. 2018, when I opened, I had the privilege of hiring every incredibly talented bartender I could find who knew everything about everything and knew our books inside and out. Well, if you think about it, most of our employees are in their 20s. Well, how old were they when we wrote our book,
Right.
right? Most of them were 10 and under. So they don't know the Death and Co book you all read and are talking about
Mm-hmm.
and that we built ourselves on.
Mm-hmm.
Death and Co is not that Death and Co to our current majority of our employees. So how do we adjust who we are, express ourselves, and create culture to somebody who's not the same type of person that I was hiring 8 years ago?
What
No,
I
I
can tell
absolutely
you
love.
real quick is, I'm sorry, just a real quick. So what, Willie, I love that. And what I can tell anyone who's listening to this is I've been fortunate to interact with some of the managers at different locations all over the country. They can immediately tell you these five, and they can immediately tell you what they mean. And the power in that is immense. I just think that defines what it means to have a really great culture. So kudos to you guys for putting in the work, and you deserve all the fruits of that labor. And I think it's awesome. Sorry, Meenakshi, go ahead.
Thank you.
No, I was just adding on to the fact that um, I love the fact that you talked about growing and revisiting the core values as you grow. Of course, the times are changing, but also your employee set, mindset, the world itself is also evolving constantly, right? Culturally speaking, and it's really key. I feel that you keep coming back to who you are, but also at the same time, is this who you are really, or is this who you were, is the question, right? So I feel a lot of the organizations which I have been part of, and I've seen that, is that a lot of times this happens that we are almost in who we were rather than who we are phase, and they don't really sound very relevant to the team that is joining very much now. They have no context of what happened in even 10 years ago, 15 years ago is a big number. So that's really good that you're talking about evolving and learning with the times, and of course revisiting it all the time. I feel as a challenge would be that how much are you living those core values, and how often are you visiting those with your coaching, with your regular interventions, trainings, of course, founder interactions, and also bringing this down to the culture is seeping into the lowest common denominator here, where we are talking about is everybody understanding what this really means, and sometimes you can be living in your own cloud and in your own world, thinking that this is who you are as an organization, but at a level at which you might not be interacting enough, or you're not really there all the time. This could be a big miss sometimes, and I think the fact that you can keep it relevant and keep going back to your team and visit it again and again is a very, very core important part of maintaining core values. I love that. Yes, absolutely appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that's changing so dramatically is the amount of talented competition in the cocktail landscape. Even in the last 8 years of my introduction to the cocktail, sector of F&B, there was a lot of people doing really wonderful things, and now there's an incredible amount of people doing wonderful things in big markets and small markets with product, just as good as ours, right? You can get a cocktail that's a fantastic, well thought out, well put together, right? Attention to detail and the fresh juices and the way in which they're handling their things everywhere, right? And that wasn't the case when it was Death and Co. New York only, or even when Death and Co. Denver opened.
Yeah.
It's all that much more important now when there's a million cool kids out there to compete with. We also used to be on the list winning the awards, and not as much anymore. It's less of a necessarily a goal of ours than it used to be, but also there's a lot of people doing amazing stuff out there, and we do still want to remain true to who we are. We're not trying to dramatically change what we do and how we do it. and that means we're more the old guy in the room now, and we're
No,
happy with it.
absolutely. No, and I would say that a very interesting thing about today's time is team retention, attrition, keeping your team motivated enough. A lot of times, with the awards, with the lists, most of your young team would be looking to join and at least follow through into looking at joining an organization which is on their way up to the lists or already up there. How do you manage those expectations within the team to say that, okay, you're here for a long term? How are you managing those expectations for your team?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. We speak about it up front. Part of our onboarding process is the introduction of the core values, of course. It's also the talking through who we are, who we want to be, and what our goals are in general. So they really understand where we're at. But we also talk about that with the employee. Who are you? What are you looking for? What do you want to get out of this? In our interview process, it's not just what's your experience and do we like you? It's what do you want to get out of this job? Why do you want to be, say, a host? We want to make sure that what they believe the job to be is what we believe the job to be before we will even consider hiring them. We want to make sure we're on the same page. We want to understand what their goals are and that they align with ours as well. A really great example is when we were talking about growth strategy along the way and whether it's Death and Co. or is it going to be a new brand or another close company. A lot of that is really centered around not just the business's growth, but the opportunity for growth for our people, right? Because as you all know, you could have an incredible, I don't know, let's say bar back, become bartender, become bar manager, become GM of that one location, and that's it. There's nothing left in a lot of bars, restaurants, organizations, right? And so you have this wonderfully talented person. They've worked their way up. They're loyal. They're smart. They've learned a ton. Well, what we've done is created somebody who's capable of more, wants more, and who's going to leave because that's it, right? And that's okay. We want them to go and take advantage of what they've learned and gained and grow and take another opportunity, but we'd rather keep them within our organization. So part of our growth strategy is really centered around creating more opportunity for our people too, right? So actually, I have a great example. We're opening Seattle, and we've got a bartender in Denver who's going to move to Seattle to be our head bartender there. Well, now a bartending position opened up for somebody in Denver that we don't have, especially in our bartending team, we don't have a lot of openings, right? They don't leave often. They enjoy where they work. They learn a lot. They make okay money and they stick around. And so people are waiting and anxious for that opportunity. If we don't have anywhere for people to go, those opportunities are few and far between. So as we grow, it creates some more opportunity, more upward mobility, and that's a really big part of how we hopefully motivate, but also when we talk about a benefit to us to have somebody who bartend for us for years help us open a new location.
Yeah, no, it's also, yeah, you're giving them a ladder also and showing them. And I also feel like the great plus would be that you're giving them your DNA, right? So your DNA is going to the next new bar, and which I feel would be the biggest plus here. You're not learning from scratch, and you're hopefully taking the same culture and starting from the same space, right? The people are the culture, right? So the organization is benefit a lot from that. That's a great thing to do. Um,
I, I could talk 2 hours to Willie. I mean, I'm kind of curious. I'm more the, like you said, I'm kind of a real estate guy. Found all the locations. The team negotiated, the sale, purchase of the buildings. We've renovated them. But in between finding a location and then opening, there's just a ton of stuff. I mean, some of it must be fun. And I know it is because some of it is fun, but some of it's just so frustrating. And everything takes longer and everything costs more. So how do you work these contingencies into your pro forma? And then how do you work the contingencies into the P&L, like the first year's P&L when you're when you're trying to get stabilized? So being a numbers guy and having to do this for the locations, I was getting pretty good. But I was still it was always wrong. I always knew the P&L was wrong. I always knew the timeline was wrong. I always knew the cost was wrong. I mean, that's just one of the things. So how do you tell me in your world what goes
Yeah,
on?
I mean, we're still wrong too.
Yeah.
But, we sort of start with what we call a pencil test, right? You may have heard of that before, and it's approximate cost per square foot, approximately what we can make per square foot, all that kind of stuff. And then we do our best that, again, like when we get into market meeting people, oftentimes we know some people and we'll get to know business owners and ask them questions. We'll say to them, how are things going in this market? Places where we're unsure of how it might perform. We'll dig deep and be open and honest with people and see what kind of feedback we can get. Also, in going to these towns and experiencing them, you get an idea too. Can be pretty helpful. You're not wrong. Like the cost of doing business in the world for any business is just skyrocketing. The labor we all know about is incredibly challenging, but also, your fixed costs are we calculated that we're up almost 20% on fixed costs, and you can't translate that down to the consumer at a 20+% if you include the labor price increase, like maybe we used to with a little bit of inflation, right? So it's tough, right? What we're doing now is finding creative ways to raise and drive revenue, things we didn't used to do in the past, focused marketing efforts that we really didn't do. We're growing our marketing department. We're not just focused on social media like we used to be. So diversifying how we raise revenue, also cost savings. We're really looking deep at what is Death & Co. We spoke earlier about what Death & Co. is versus what it was, and say, okay, well, the market challenges are telling us we need to look at a different way of doing business, right? We might need to, what's a good example? Create some standing room. We've been a no standing room allowed business for 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe now we need that, or maybe we need to take a step down from how formal our service is, so we don't necessarily need food runners and busters all the time. Right? So we're trying to balance this. How do you create more revenue and create cost savings without completely not being who you are? And those are all the things we're asking ourselves right now. Similarly, the size of the operation, right? So we got bigger in like square footage and how many people we could take.
Right.
And now we're going back to smaller.
Yeah. 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 Sales per square foot and efficiencies.
Yep.
I mean, insurance has gone up crazy.
Insurance has been one of the hardest things besides labor.
And then when we started 10 years ago and y'all started, sounds like 15 years ago, you could be a bar. And a matter of, our roots are as a beer bar. We were beer only for the first 2.5 years. We didn't know, we were kind of the neighborhood pub. But nowadays you have to entertain everybody. It's not enough to serve a good cocktail. There has to be a music bingo or a musician or a big concert in your backyard. It's no longer, you have to entertain. And at least that's in the markets we're at now. So
Yeah,
yeah,
you're right. We're doing a lot of that too, right?
there
Finding
you go. Right.
pop-ups and activities,
Yeah.
that we can do to differentiate. And again, there's so much competition that, historically you have your watering hole. And people went to the same place all the time where they knew their name and they enjoyed whatever it may be. But now most consumers love to try everything, and there's new things popping up all the time, and they want to go there. And it's far fewer and far between that somebody is visiting you on a weekly basis,
Right.
let alone a monthly basis.
Yeah. 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 But it definitely diminishes, I think, the overall, I mean, someone's going to get hurt. And for instance, a 12-unit taco joint just opened up down the street from us, and there are already 2 other Mexican restaurants in town, and they're just getting hammered. And so, there's a proverb I always use: excess profits breeds ruinous competition. And so here's this taco joint that's just operating, I mean, just masterclass on opening and masterclass on marketing, and also the margaritas and mezcal program. And these 2 other locations are just, I mean, it's a little bit sad, but that's the business we're in. You could be the hot number, and then someone opens up right next to you and maybe does something a little bit differently, and there's a honeymoon period that you're going to have to survive.
Yeah, I think there's something interesting there that we're focused on as well as we move into a new market, which is, when we're hiring, being careful who we're hiring, not hiring more
Right.
than one person from somebody else because
Yeah.
can be detrimental, and but also supporting one another, right?
Mhm.
Cocktail industry small. We want to help everybody within that industry. We hope that they would do the same for us. The goal is to send each other business and do pop-ups together and all that kind of stuff because it really does benefit everyone in this
Yeah.
case.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Well, and
Willie,
something I
if I
think
may, am I back? Can you guys hear me? Can I tell you something interesting, Willie, that I learned about some of the stuff you talked about with financial challenges that I think might fit your values, but you please feel free to ignore this idea if it's going to get you fired. So, working with a group similar to yours that you're probably familiar with, it's all the same challenges and everyone's trying to solve. And as things get more and more expensive, people tend to constrict with the expense. How do I save? How do I cut? How do I reduce with the growing expense? It's a tough way to win. So what I did was I convinced the ownership team to sort of flip that. I did this with two different groups with a reasonable degree of success. And what we did, one example, fun thing that might fit your values is we did a $500 challenge. So we gave $500 every GM and said, do whatever you want with it. Here's $500. You invest it into your location in a way that will generate 4 or 5x. What would you do? And so they went off and they had to think about that. And then they came back with their answers. And basically, there was do whatever you want. And when one, just as an example, one person said, look, I know if I have extra bar backs on Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, I'll generate 4x. And they did. So there's a few other two unique examples that I can't share. That one's not so unique. But the really great thing about that was, to your point, like open book. Hey, so here's our numbers. And by the way, I've invested in you. I've trusted you. Go show me how you can generate a return because I'm not in Denver. I'm not in Seattle. I'm not in Sydney. I can't, nor should I think for you. Let me give you money that you can give me a return on that investment. And if you prove you can do it once, I'll do it again. I'll give you another 5 and I'll give you another 5. Now it's to your point, you're pursuing excellence and sometimes you're not going to get it right. But sometimes we do the exact opposite. I'm not getting preachy, but sometimes we do the exact opposite thing. We get nervous about the cost. We get nervous about our spend. And sometimes the only way you can re-leverage fixed cost is on the top line revenue. But it's hard to affect top line revenue by shrinking. So you have to do some things that are counterintuitive. And you go, you know what? I need to reinvest back in to re-leverage my fixed cost to drive me back to a place of profitability that I want to be. I'm saying that sort of in general, Chris, to your audience or to anyone out there. We've had some dynamite success with look, $500. It's not like it's this huge risk. But the care and responsibility that people treat that $500 is incredible. And then measure it. They have to show me the return at the end, like prove to me that it worked. It's some cool stuff. So just as a general commentary, I came in, I fell out for a minute, and I came back in, I was listening, and it's hard to cut your way to profitability, which Cliff, you were saying that's another good one. It's hard to cut your way to success, and you got to find a way sometimes to grow uniquely out of it, which you guys are doing. But there's sort of the typical answers of, hey, let's do entertainment. Let's open for lunch. And that was actually another one that people opened for lunch during specific hours. They got the green light to do it during certain times and generated huge returns. But sometimes opening for lunch is disastrous.
No, we had the largest roofer in the Southeast kind of do a bar spin yesterday, for a couple hours. Boom. They brought a handful of people and they were just buying drinks on it to anybody that walked by.
That'll do it.
So, I mean, there's, and ironically, that was about $500, so, and then, yeah, you've got to be creative in this market and you got to fight. You got to fight. You really do.
Well,
Sometimes we think we
say
have
you
to do
can-
all the thinking for our people.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the same. Hire local, trust the people that are doing the business every day. And if you've done a good job in hiring, why are you hesitating and trusting them on making some fairly
I agree.
small decisions?
It wasn't my idea. It was their idea.
Yeah, see? Yeah.
Well, and we keep saying you can only save so much, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
at
Right.
some point in time, you're eroding your product.
Yeah.
You're making their jobs harder, right? Especially when it comes to trimming labor. Lunch is interesting because, a lot of places that you see them and you're like, I can't believe they do lunch. There's nobody in there.
Mhm.
Well, they probably had people in there anyway. They're probably doing prep, whether those doors were open or not. And so we've got people here, we're paying labor. We might as well also trickle in some revenue while we're here, right?
Mhm.
It's an interesting way to approach it.
Mhm.
Yeah. And also, like a lot of times, really established brands tend to stick to, the brand book, right? Who they are, what they do. And sometimes it's always good to digress to look beyond, the operating hours, sometimes even beyond, the kind of things that you would typically not do. Like, even simple small things like pop ups on slow nights really, really help you because, and sending your team out for pop ups on slow nights when you didn't really have much going on. So I think that really we do a lot of chef pop-ups, and we just recently did a book reading with a really really famous really well established author, and we put a ticket price to the book reading, and yeah, it was fantastic. It was my leanest hour, 4 to 6, when you're not at happy hours nor in an office. You're in the middle somewhere, and it just works, like, and it's a zero cost event. I was like, the venue, I just need a ticket, one drink, everybody has to buy, so it's simple and really good quality of people also walk in. Like, the kind of people who also walk into an event like this are the exactly kind of people I want at my bar, so it sort of fits and checks all the boxes without the effort that typically it would take to market an event and create an entire buzz for it, get people into the room, get them to buy. So this sort of really works. I mean, a lot of times collaborations are under almost like, we don't really put enough impetus and importance to collaborations, and just pretty much just put them on pop-ups and bar shifts and typical ways of doing collaborations. But I think you can go beyond that, like looking at coffee, looking at chefs, looking at, you're still in the F&B sphere, but you're doing something completely out of whack, something that nobody expects a bar to do. So it's just fun to go there sometimes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oftentimes those pop-ups aren't about revenue, they're about marketing, right? And sometimes you're pleasantly surprised that some money came in as well.
Oh, yeah. Pop-ups are
But
always
the
a big
more
market.
creative those are, the more outside the norm, the more traction they're going to get in terms of marketing, but also potentially in their success, right? And it's funny you say a book reading because we're working on organizing a book reading and signing at Death and Co. Denver. We have a daytime program. We have a coffee shop there called DCAM, Death and Co. AM. And there's a lady who's become a regular, coming in, getting her breakfast and her coffee, and she's been writing her book in the bar for years, and she's
So
finishing it.
cool.
And so one of our baristas, as she was like, I'm almost done, they've gotten to know her really well, said, why don't you come here and release it with us and do a book signing and do a book reading, and we'll host you, and then no charge because obviously you haven't put your book on the market yet, but a really really cool sort of full circle opportunity, and funny that we're both doing book readings at our cocktail bars.
Yeah.
So something that's triggered in my head as we're talking here, and it goes to Willie, what you were saying about being careful about what costs you cut, and it goes to what Dave was saying about getting feedback from managers. To me, one of the things that people miss the most in this industry, and it drives me crazy when I talk to my clients, your frontline folks, like your dishwasher, knows how to save you money if you ask them how to make their job easier, right? Your barback knows how to save you money if you ask them how to make your job easier. As an owner, I didn't know shit, right? My team knew everything. I just asked them, and they'd be like, hey, if you did this, it would make my job easier. And I'd be like, okay. Turns out you make their job easier, it saves you money. And it's so funny, especially as I've gone from ownership to the coaching side, where people expect me to have problem or answers. And I'm like, I don't know anything about your business. I don't know where you are. I've never been to your city. Like, I know nothing. But I can tell you how to ask a good question that will get us the answer. And so often, I feel like in ownership, people want answers and they try to come up with the answers themselves rather than realizing it's about the question and your team knows how to save you the money.
Yeah, we didn't talk about this previously, but we do an annual, like, send out a bunch of questions to the entire team, and we're pushing 200 employees now, and give them the opportunity to give us feedback. And it's just that. And this is, sure, it's just once a year, but it's anonymous. And so it allows them to say maybe the bigger, more concerning things, but we also get all kinds of funny little anecdotes that we can use in one location or all locations like that. And of course, we're fortunate enough that our management teams take a lot of ownership. They treat the bars like their own. And so they're always asking those questions. And frankly, from our perspective, and actually this is getting hard now, they don't need to come back and tell us that slight change they made with the bar back to make the job easier. They just need to make the decision. It's funny, it's changing a little bit. As we've grown and we're hiring new managers, they're getting a little more afraid to just do and like, oh, I need to tell them or ask them and they really don't. We trust them and that's getting a little muddy. And I don't know if that's maybe something we've done differently or wrong with our growth. Maybe it's just sort of this generation and the way they want to make sure they're doing it right. But it's interesting. I don't have an anecdote there, but yeah, it's really fascinating that the change we've seen. And you're so right. That I'm sitting behind my computer in Evergreen, even though I'm right down the street from Denver. I can't tell them exactly what sort of staffing model they need. They need to tell me.
Yeah, we started, get back to the P&Ls. Our managers and assistant managers get reviewed by my business partner, Zach. Chris knows him. And so we bonus on the controllables as well as other items. So they're always asking those questions on how to cut the controllable expenses, how to increase revenue, how to decrease cost of goods. It's a big chunk of their bonus is writing on that. So, hire some good people, hire some people that like to make a little extra cash, get some accolades, move up in the world. And Willie, like you said, move up and out maybe. If we don't have a position here for them, they'll lateral or maybe step up into some other food and beverage position. But yeah. Um, they're asking those questions probably more than I'm asking them.
Yeah. Cliff, I'm glad you say that. Something that really important to us is that piece of, we don't care if you work for us for 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years and leave. What's most important is that, you got something out of it. And I always say, not just professionally, personally, even we have a host right now who's on her way out, moving, and she was so shy and timid and had very little voice. The door at a Death and Co can be very hard. We have long waits. They don't understand that they can't just go and stand, or why is that table empty? I can see it. Well, because somebody else was waiting for an hour and a half and we've already invited them back. They don't get it, right? And so they can be pretty aggressive with our young hosts. And, when we hired her, it was a lot. She was overwhelmed. She had a hard time communicating with guests the right way. And now 2 years later, she has found her voice and confidence and it has allowed her to move on as an individual to something else. And wasn't a professional change. It was a personal change.
No, absolutely. The 20-year-olds are all growing and they're growing exponentially between 20 and 25. And you're right. I mean, I've had young men, 6'3", slouching behind the bar. I'm like, dude, stand up tall, man. You're now 5'9". I mean, I know you're 6'4". Let's so teaching one kid how to hold a hammer. I mean, I can't believe he never had a hammer in his hand before. So it's so much. That's the fun part about being the owner and being able to walk in there and kind of, throw some fatherly love around, But yeah, they and I was an industry kid. I worked in fast food and lots of restaurants from 15 to 25. And yeah, that shapes you. So I think it's a fantastic industry to be in, whether you're passing through or whether you chose it or whether it's a default, but there's some negatives and, we can talk about that some other.
Yeah, because unfortunately we are pushing against our time. So I wanna first of all say, Willie, thank you so much for being here. Then I wanna also give you an opportunity. Is there anything else that we have not touched on that you think people need to know?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think
How good of a skateboarder are you?
pretty good. Much better surfer and a much, much better snowboarder.
Nice.
That's interesting. I think something that I was dwelling on a lot in sort of preparing for this conversation is, I think things have changed a bit in our industry and our guests want really authentic connection more than ever. And I truly believe that what sets that really talented cocktail bar with the delicious drinks and beautiful space and dialed service apart one from the other is that personal touch. It is the true definition of hospitality that separates one from another today, not what's in the glass, not how cool your space is, not how well trained you are. Although that is wonderful and valuable and is a part of the experience, but people are really looking for that. And I think it's hard to find naturally. Something that we've seen a lot of success in is the behind the scenes stuff, the systems and process. We have tons of process. It can be overwhelming for somebody who came from a mom and pop that had none. But the more of it we have, it honestly allows more time, space, and energy for those organic conversations and those true connections. Because the other things, the behind the scenes, the how tos, the what you need and when is dialed in. And I think it's really important for people to know that right now, I believe the future of the bar business is about developing leadership. It's not about developing cool cocktails, techniques, technology, doing something nobody's ever done before. Frankly, it's going to be really hard to do that. Technology can do it, but at the end of the day, pretty much every drink's been made in one way or another. You just half an ounce more here or there, if you will. It's really about leadership. It's about people, culture, and those connections. And that's really where we're shifting our focus to the best of our ability. Hence why a bunch of my leaders are meeting with Dave on a regular basis.
Before we let you go, give you an opportunity. Anything you want to push? Any Instagrams people should go check out? Any websites they should go to find out more about Gin and Luck, Death and Co., any of it?
I wasn't ready for that either. Well, we are opening Seattle, and we will be hiring if anybody in that area is seeing this. And we didn't talk much about our hotels, actually. I'd love to plug Midnight at Tour Hotels. We've got one location in Savannah, Georgia called Municipal Grand. Beautiful property, small boutique hotel, very F&B driven, much like the Ramble in Denver, which is hired in F&B or outsourced F&B. But we own and operate the whole thing. It's been an incredible challenge to learn hotel operations, and it's really fun. The food there is incredible. The drinks are on par with anything we do anywhere else. It's got a cool rooftop pool bar that's open to the public, and probably my favorite bar in the company called the Hot Eye in the basement, which is just like a little fun, I don't know, cocktail bar with dark lights, loud music, really fun atmosphere. So yeah, go see Municipal Grand in Savannah.
Yeah. Well, we'll make sure we put links for that and everything else, Gin and Luck and Death and Co. related down in the show notes. So if you're listening, you want to check out more, scroll down. It will all be there. With that, Willie, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a fantastic conversation, a lot of fun. And it's so great to learn from someone who has been through that transition of, right, going from the second store in a brand to now multiple brands, hotels, the whole bit that you guys are doing. I think it's just such a cool and unique story. So really appreciate you coming on and sharing that with us.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking me too. This is really fun. As
Thanks,
Dick
Willie.
knows, I've never done anything like this before. I enjoyed it. You guys make it easy. So thank you.
Thanks for being here, man. It was fun.
Yeah, definitely fun.
I no longer get to be just the guy behind the scenes because of this.